here's a list of all the parts and the prices of what you're gonna need to do an AR5 swap in your IS300. The way I did it, I opted not to do the way with Drift Motion where they take, they transform to R154 basically, where they take the fork and the clutch and they make it a pull instead of the push type of the W58. And it's a little more, for me, it was a little more cost effective to do it this way, mostly because I'm not too familiar with the R154, so I wasn't really comfortable enough with putting that together, so I went with this route, which converts your AR5 to be able to use, you can use the internal slave that it came with, and you can also use W58 and W55 parts, which are generally a lot cheaper than the R154 stuff. First off, obviously, the AR5. You're going to want a 06 and below, I believe. 06 and below AR5, those have the mounts that will allow you to correctly mount it to the IS chassis. I believe the 07, 08, those have a different mounting style, which makes it kind of difficult. I got mine for $375. You guys may not be able to find a deal like that. I got pretty lucky. Actually, the guy just wrecked his car, and so I just picked it up for pretty cheap. Generally, they're gonna run between $500 and $700 depending on the condition. Bell housing. Bell housing from a 1JZ bell housing from Drift Motion is gonna run you about $330. Now that bell housing bolts straight on. Since the AR5 is just a newer R154 basically, it's got the same casing, same bolt patterns for everything. As you'll see when we get down to the shifter, that bolts right on too. So you need bell housing to obviously hook it up to your JZ that's in your IS. Next thing you're gonna need is the 86 Landcruiser master cylinders. Those are pretty cheap. It's a 3/4 bore, which is required to run if you're gonna use the internal slave like I did, T56 style. I found that on Amazon for like 36 bucks. It was pretty cheap. Wasn't too hard to find either. Now the JZX100 shifter housing. This is what you're gonna need to have your shifter sit properly in the IS chassis. Without it, if you just tried to use the stock Solstice shifter, what it'll do is it'll sit about 3 to like 6 inches back. And I mean, it'll work, but you'll do a lot of cutting and it's really not ideal for the application. So you're gonna wanna get this shifter housing to make sure that your shifter will actually line up in the right place. And from the bell housing to the middle of the shifter hole is about 29 inches and a quarter. And that'll sit it actually perfect. So there really shouldn't be any cutting or anything with this swap, unless you run into driveline issues, which I'll get to eventually. And that was about 200 bucks. That you're gonna have to order from Japan. Either order from Japan or Drift Motion. Either one's gonna be pretty expensive. For the part at least, it's gonna be 200 bucks right there. And then you got your W55 shifter. Now I didn't go with the OEM one. Appreciate it. Real nice. I didn't go with the OEM shifter simply because I didn't want to go backwards really. I got one from Nonstop Tuning. It's just a Ralco basically. It was like 90 bucks. It shifts good. It's angled towards you, so if you don't like that, it's probably something to think about. Maybe just get a stock one. But most of the IS shifters, except for Cube Speed, I believe, theirs is straight up and down. But most of the aftermarket shifters for the W55 are going to lean towards you, so if that's a problem, you should probably look into that. Pressure plate. W58 pressure plate is going to work with this application. Now, you can get a stock one, you can get an aftermarket one. I just went with an OEM one. I didn't really see the need to really bump that up too much. So if you're buying the parts individually, it's going to run you between 65 to 100 bucks, which isn't bad. Again, when you're putting together a clutch kit by yourself, it's not too expensive. The flywheel, same deal. I used the OEM flywheel, W58 flywheel again. It was 120 bucks I got off a guy down here in Houston. And about $40 for a resurface, just to make sure it's all clean and you don't want to put any old stuff in your car, especially when you're doing the work. Might as well do it while you're in there. And the clutch disc. A lot of people get this confused because you're using the GM transmission and you're using the GM input shaft, so the splines are a lot different than what a W58 would be. So you can't really use a W58 clutch disc. So you're going to go with the Chevy S10 clutch disc, or a custom one. I know Excessive Manufacturing makes one. Drift Motion has a clutch disc they make for this swap that fits the AR5 splines. It's going to be around $165 for that clutch disc. I personally went with a 6-puck clutch disc, sprung. 6-puck sprung. And the spline that you're going to be looking for, it's going to be a T26 spline. So 26 splines on the input shaft, and I'll put in the diameter of the clutch disc somewhere here or whatever. just so you can get the right specs. But any clutch with that'll meet up with those specs will work just fine for that. The drive shaft. When you get back there, it's kind of, this is where a lot of people get turned off to the transmission, because a lot of people have issues with making the drive shaft work, whether it's the angle that the trans is sitting at to make sure the angles are right, or if it's getting it balanced, or it's the telescoping. Some people get the telescoping, some people don't. I personally, all I did was I just took the front end of my 2-piece stock IS drive shaft from my automatic trans, chopped off the front, then I put on the drift motion adapter flange, which is about $130. It's a 6-bolt flange in the end of AR5. GM does it different. It's not like a slip yoke like your standard RM54, W58 or whatever. Cut that off, measure. What you want to do is you want to measure from the part where the 2-piece bolts into the chassis. You got this piece right here on the chassis, and you got the back of the transmission. You want to measure from the face of the flange all the way to the center where those 2 bolt holes go, where the drive shaft bolts up, where the carrier bearings is, sorry. And that's where you're gonna be your measurements at for that. And you want to do that with the car on all 4 wheels so you get an accurate measurement. I made that mistake, I had to pay for it twice. But down here I got that modified for about $410. It is a little bit pricey, in my opinion, for what they're doing. They're just kind of taking off material, but I'm sure it's well worth it. You want your stuff to run right for sure if you're going pretty fast. And then you also want to get that balance. It should be another $100. And after that, like I said, the adapter flange is about $130. Only Drift Motion makes that. You're kind of stuck with that, buying that from them. When it comes to the trans mount, I put a question mark here because I didn't really use the stock trans mount. What I did was I just went and got a piece of metal and I cut out the holes right and I bolted it up there. And that's what all the aftermarket mounts look like. It works, but it doesn't really do the job as much as something like an OEM mount would. Now you can use an OEM mount like an Altezza mount on the AR5, and then you can just stock IS like cross member and it'll bolt up just fine. But I didn't know that time, so that might actually school bus, bro. But that might actually help you. Rather than trying to. If you're not really good with fab or like drilling holes and measuring. You can just use your stock automatic cross member or manual, whatever you got, and an Altezza mount, and it'll bolt up just like factory. And finally, most importantly, the pilot bearing. The pilot bearing is another piece that you can only get from Drift Motion. It's got a custom, I think it's the inner diameter is 15 millimeters and the outer is like 32 or something. But you need that because it's the only custom piece that'll make the AR5 transmission fit into back of the JZ. Without that, all the other pilot bearings for the RM54 or the W58, the input shaft won't sit right, and it won't work. Basically, you won't have you'll have a hard time putting that in. And the grand total here of all these parts is about $2 grand. Now, I mean, $2 grand you could have went out and got an RM54. But you know, but then we start talking about things like, is it worth it? You know, it's a 20-year-old transmission. It's going to have flaws no matter what you do. You know, it's old technology. The AR5 to me is just really safer, in my opinion. It's got the upgraded synchros. It's out of a newer car. It's gonna feel smoother. I know mine feels a hell of a lot smoother than some of the RM54 cars I drove. It definitely is not so much to worry about with the seals and having the old push fork, pull the forks and all the clips and retainers and all that. For me, it's just the internal slave, like T56 style, just one piece, and that goes up to your master and you call it a day. You know, it's real simple to put together. It's not a headache. Not a lot of moving pieces. Easy to replace things when they break. Now the only downfall is you do have to pull the trans if your slave goes out. But I mean, if you're already doing this, tackling this, that shouldn't be an issue for you. If you're already trying to do a project like this. I know a lot of this information is on forums and stuff like that. It took me a while personally to dig for all this, but no one's really kind of put it in English for people, because everyone on the forum assumes that we all know what they're talking about. But things like the topic of trimming the input shaft. I know a lot of people say that you don't have to trim the input shaft, you have to trim it. What it's good to do is generally, what I did, I just took about 1/8 of an inch off the end of my input shaft. It's really not a lot. I took 1/8 of an inch off just to give myself the leeway in case it didn't fit, because I got mixed answers wherever I went. I couldn't find a straight answer. So what I did was I just took like 1/8 of an inch off, and that gave me the peace of mind to know that I'm not gonna drill a hole into the back of my crank when I start the car up. But But that was another thing that everyone talks about with the input shaft. It'll fit. I've talked to plenty of people. I talked to actually one of the first guys who did the swap, and he said that he did it without trimming it. But peace of mind, trim it, you know, get it out of the way. It's not hard. Get your little, you know, a little Harbor Freight Dremel or whatever, and smooth it off, get all the burrs off and all that, and you should be on your way. Now, if you are going this route, another thing I would consider is the gear ratios. Now, if you're someone who's NA and you know you just got bolt-on, just plan to keep it that way, this is a good transmission. Especially, I think the ARM54, the gear ratios for third gear is like 1.31, and the AR5 is about 1.51. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that when I drive my car, it's real, first and second gear are real short, and third for that matter. It's something that's just be mindful of that when you're going through with the Transit. It is a shorter gear ratio. If some people are into that, some people aren't. I have an Aristo swap in my IS, and so I do kind of pay forward with first and second gear because I don't get much out of it when boost. But third gear is nice, especially third gear on the highway. You know, if you're trying to get some of these pulls in, it definitely pulls a lot harder than something like ARM54 or something with longer gear ratios would. If for my application, at least, I'm not making more than 450 wheels, so I'm not really too concerned about having a huge power band for my boost because I don't make too much of it. But as far as that goes, that is something to be mindful for sure. If you're worried about that, if you want the longest gear ratios possible, coupled with the fact that if you have an automatic, you might already have a 3.93 ratio, I believe, in the rear, and that will make it even more short. Like I have the same diff in the rear, and that makes it really short. So that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about choosing this transmission, see if it's right for you. Also, this is the CX Racing kit. I'm running, so this is basically the intercooler piping, blow-off valve, all that good nonsense. Well, I got my own intercooler, but that's another story for another time. That's why my bumper's so fucked up. Got a Vertex kit on the way though. Shifter is in a good place. Now, a lot of the times with the ARM54 swaps, you'll see a lot of guys have all this up here cut out and it looks all, you know, it looks all fucked up. But with the AR5, it sits right in the middle. You can even use stock shift boot. Looks pretty OEM. Like I said earlier, Rocco shifter. It's pretty damn short. I mean, I don't have any complaints about it. Said pretty much just basic interior. Clusterfuck of wires. I'm gonna be doing the whole headliner black and all that, so I kind of left that out. It's kind of couldn't be bothered to tuck that up quite yet because I'm gonna be pulling it apart anyways. But yeah, pretty standard stuff. So if I can get it to start up. There we go. Not too loud. I still have a muffler and a cat, so that's a thing. Runs a little rich, but it'll be fine. Let's turn that off. But yeah, I really don't have any complaints about the trans besides the pain it's been to get the drive shaft to cooperate. But once you get yours balanced and all that, it's really not that much of an issue. You just gotta give it a little more love than usual. But yeah, that's my take on the topic.